The forest is screaming, but no, not the forest. It is her. Rapunzel is on her knees in the dirt, alone with no midwife, no mother, no witch who raised her, just trees and darkness and pain that splits her body in half. The first baby comes, tiny and blood-covered and crying. She has no knife to cut the cord, so she uses her teeth and tastes copper and salt, the taste of betrayal and blood mixing on her tongue. 20 minutes later, the second baby comes, another girl with more blood and more screaming, hers and theirs mixing with nightbirds and wind. She wraps them in her torn dress and holds them against her chest. 2 daughters born 7 months after she was thrown from the tower, 7 months of surviving on scraps and charity. And now this, twins. She is 18 years old, and this is where the real story of Rapunzel leads. Not to a wedding, not to a kiss, but to this moment of being alone and bleeding and holding 2 lives she has no idea how to keep alive. Tonight, the screams do not end with a lullaby. A girl with impossibly long golden hair, a tower with no door, a prince who climbs up to save her, magic and singing and true love's kiss, the kind of story where beauty is rewarded, where patience is a virtue, where someone always comes to rescue you if you just wait long enough. It is a nice story, a safe story, the kind we tell children at bedtime. But here is what they do not tell you about that version. The girl in the tower was stolen as payment for a debt. The prince got her pregnant, then failed to protect her. She gave birth to twins in the wilderness with no help. He wandered the forest blind for 7 years with both eyes destroyed by thorns. That scream you heard at the beginning, that is where this story goes. Not to happily ever after, but to survival, to trauma that never heals. Welcome to the Pandora's Project, where the stories you think you know unravel, and those brave enough to listen find the truths that others dare not speak. For those who walk with us into fairy tale shadows, you are not alone. We break these seals together. We are the ones who look behind the door. Some fairy tales begin after the happy ending has been buried. Before we open this seal, if uncovering what the fairy tales buried matters to you, like and subscribe so you are here when the next tomb cracks open. Now, let us go back to where it started. Not with a tower, but with a garden, because in the dark, the old bargains always come due. Part 1. The Debt. There was once a man and his wife who lived at the edge of a great forest in Germany, where the man was a tradesman, ordinary and the kind who keeps his head down and tries not to make waves. His wife was pregnant with their first child, and the pregnancy was difficult as she grew pale and weak and could not keep food down, lying in bed for days with her face to the wall while the midwives came and said there was nothing to be done, that she might recover after the birth, or she might not. Then one evening she spoke. "Husband," she whispered, "there is something I need, something I crave so intensely I think I shall die without it." "Anything. Name it." Her eyes were feverish as she said, "Rampion, the salad green. There is a garden next door that grows it. I can see it from our window. The most beautiful rampion I've ever seen. I need to taste it. If I do not, the child and I will both die." The man looked out the window and saw that half a mile away stood a magnificent garden surrounded by high stone walls, and inside he could see rows of vegetables growing with unnatural vigor. Everything too green, too perfect, too healthy. What the man did not know was who owned that garden, a woman who lived alone behind those walls, a woman the villagers called an enchantress, a sorceress, a witch. That night when the moon was high, the man crept to the garden wall, climbed over and dropped down into silence so absolute it was never empty, then grabbed a handful of rampion leaves that came away easily, as if they wanted to be taken. And he found himself face to face with the witch, who had appeared from nowhere, who was not old but ageless, 30 or 60 and impossible to tell, with long dark hair and a face beautiful in a cold, sharp way, and eyes that were the eyes of someone who had seen too much and felt too little. "Thief," she said softly. "You dare steal from me." The man fell to his knees and pleaded, "Please forgive me. My wife is pregnant. She has been so sick. She said she would die without tasting your rampion. I only took a handful." The witch studied him for a long moment, then spoke. "Very well. Take the rampion. Take as much as your wife desires. Come back tomorrow night and the night after. But nothing is free. There is always a price. Name it, whatever you want." "When your wife gives birth," the witch interrupted, "the child will be mine. You will give it to me the moment it enters the world. That is the price." "No, I cannot." "Then your wife will die. She will die and the child will die with her, because the craving is not natural, you see. I made sure of that. I planted the desire in her the same way I planted these vegetables, deep, with roots that cannot be pulled up. You have a choice. Agree to my terms, or watch her waste away." The man was weak. He had always been weak, and so he said, "I agree. The child is yours." 9 months later, his wife gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and the witch appeared at the window before the midwife had even cut the cord. "The debt," she said. "Pay it." The wife understood that debts to creatures like this must be paid, so she said, "Take her and go." The witch took the baby and held her up to examine her, and the child did not cry but looked at the witch with dark, curious eyes. "I will call her Rapunzel," the witch said. "After the plant her father valued more than her life." And then she was gone, taking the baby with her and leaving the man and his wife in their empty house with nothing but their guilt and their grief. This is how the story begins, not with evil for evil's sake, but with ordinary human weakness meeting something old and patient and utterly without mercy, where the child was not cursed but simply taken, stolen in turn to pay for her father's theft. Part 2. The Tower. The witch raised Rapunzel, not with cruelty exactly, as she provided everything the child needed, including food, shelter, clothing, and education. But she was not loved, not in the way a child needs to be loved, because the witch treated her like a possession, a valuable object that needed to be maintained, with no warmth and no affection. Rapunzel grew from a baby to a child to a young girl, and she was beautiful, with hair that was the most striking thing about her, long and golden and growing faster than normal hair should, reaching her waist by the time she was 10 and to her knees by 12. Hair as both rope and chain. The witch noticed this beauty, and with the noticing came fear, because beautiful things attract attention, and the witch had not waited decades only to lose her to some ordinary human man. On Rapunzel's 12th birthday, the witch took her deep into the forest to a place where no roads went, and there in a clearing stood a tower that was impossibly tall, 40 feet at least, made of smooth gray stone with no doors, no stairs, just smooth walls rising up with a single window at the very top. "This is your new home," the witch said. "Mother, what do you mean? Where is the door?" "There is no door. That is the point." The witch spoke a word that made Rapunzel's ears ache, and a window appeared at the base through which the witch pushed Rapunzel before climbing in after her. Inside was a single circular room, furnished after a fashion with a bed, a table and chair, books, everything a girl might need to live, everything except a way out. "You will be safe here," the witch said. "Protected. No one can take you from me." "But why?" Rapunzel asked. "What have I done wrong?" "Nothing. This is simply necessary. You are a beautiful child, and this way you will be mine forever." The witch gestured, and Rapunzel felt her scalp tingle as her hair suddenly grew longer and longer, pouring from her head like golden water until it was 20 feet long. "When I want to visit," the witch said, "I will stand at the base and call to you. You will throw down your hair. I will use it to climb up. Simple." The witch climbed down using rope that appeared from the window, and from the ground she called up, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel gathered her impossibly long, heavy hair and threw it out the window, and the witch grabbed it, tested its strength, then began to climb using the hair like a rope with her feet against the tower wall. It didn't hurt because the hair was magically reinforced, and Rapunzel felt only a slight tugging at her scalp. That first day was the worst as Rapunzel checked the walls for any crack, any way to escape, but there was nothing. So she cried for hours and called for the witch to come back, to let her out, to explain why this was necessary. But no one came and no one answered. This was the pattern that would define the next 6 years of her life, with the witch coming every 3 days for visits that lasted an hour, during which she would check that Rapunzel was well and bring supplies before leaving again. 6 years, from age 12 to age 18, the most formative years of a young woman's life spent in absolute isolation. She had her books and her spinning and her needlework, but mostly she had her voice, and she sang constantly because it was the only thing that made the silence bearable. And her voice was extraordinary, pure and clear, and carrying for miles through the forest. Her voice was the only part of her with any value, because as long as she remained pure and untouched and locked away, her song was beautiful and acceptable and safe, and the world would love a caged girl who sang. But the moment she claimed her body as her own, that voice would be silenced and erased, because this was the bargain women faced. Sing in your cage or be struck mute in freedom. And eventually her voice reached someone. The prince was hunting when he heard singing, the most beautiful voice he had ever heard. So he followed the sound through dense forest for 20 minutes until the trees opened into a clearing, and he saw the tower rising impossibly high with gray stone and no door, just that high window from which the voice was coming. He called up, "Hello? Can you hear me?" The singing stopped, and a face appeared at the window, a young woman with hair catching the sun like spun gold. "Who is there?" she called down. "A traveler? I am lost. I heard your singing and followed it." They talked for an hour that day as he told her about the outside world, and she listened with wide-eyed wonder, and when he left he promised to return. And he did return the next day and the day after that. After a week, Rapunzel explained about the enchanted hair, the climbing, the witch's visits. "If your mother can climb your hair," the prince said slowly, "could I?" 2 days later he hid in the trees and watched as the witch arrived and called up, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And he saw the golden hair cascade down and the witch climb it with practiced ease. He waited until she left, then approached and called up, mimicking the witch's words, and the hair came down. So he climbed it and pulled himself through the window. For the first time he saw Rapunzel properly, more beautiful than he had imagined, young and his age perhaps, with her golden hair filling the room. But it was her eyes that struck him, large and dark and filled with an innocence that was almost painful to see, because she had never seen anything but this tower and the witch, had never experienced cruelty or kindness from anyone else, had never been touched by another human being except in the most clinical necessary ways. "Hello," he said softly. "Hello," she whispered back. They both laughed at the nervousness, the strangeness of it all, the sheer impossibility. They talked for hours, and when the sun began to set, he knew he had to leave. So she asked, "Will you come back?" "Do you want me to?" "Yes, very much." The prince returned every day for 3 months, and they were falling in love, though neither had a name for what they were feeling. 2 months after their first meeting, sitting close together by the window, the prince took her hand. "Rapunzel," he said, "I'm not just a traveler. My father is the king. I'm a prince, and I want to marry you, not some court lady, but you. I want to take you away from this tower and make you my wife." "Love," Rapunzel repeated slowly. "It is what I feel when you are here. When you leave, it is like the light goes out. Is that love?" "I think it might be." He kissed her then, and it was her first kiss, but it would not be her last. The boundaries between them dissolved as they made plans, deciding he would bring supplies so they could escape together, and it was a beautiful plan that lasted exactly 3 months. Part 3. The Fall. The witch came for her regular visit on a bright afternoon, climbing the hair as always and entering the tower as always. But something was different because Rapunzel was different, humming and smiling with a lightness that had not been there before. And then Rapunzel made her mistake, because after the witch had climbed up, Rapunzel said without thinking, "Mother, you are so much heavier than Friedrich. It hurts my head when you climb." The words were out before she realized what she had said. The name, the comparison, the implication. The room went very quiet. The witch turned slowly and asked, "What did you say?" Rapunzel's hand flew to her mouth as horror flooded her face. "Who is Friedrich?" "No one. I misspoke. You compared my weight to someone else's, someone who has been climbing your hair. How long?" "Mother, please." "How long?" Rapunzel had never heard the witch raise her voice before, so she shrank back against the wall. 3 months, she whispered. "He comes every day. He is going to take me away. We are going to be married." The witch's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, betrayal, rage, and finally something cold and terrible. "You let someone into my tower. You let a man come here and touch you after everything I did to keep you safe, after everything I sacrificed." "You did not sacrifice anything," Rapunzel said, finding defiance. "You stole me. You locked me in a tower. You kept me prisoner. Friedrich told me about the world, about freedom, and I want that. I want to leave." "Leave," the witch laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "You think you can leave. You think I would let you walk away after 18 years. You ungrateful girl. You belong to me. You have always belonged to me." "I am not yours," Rapunzel said with her voice shaking. "I am my own person, and I am leaving with Friedrich tomorrow." "Are you?" the witch asked, and she reached into her basket and pulled out shears, large and sharp. "If you want to leave so badly, then I will help you, but you are not taking my gift with you." She grabbed Rapunzel's hair, and the girl screamed and tried to pull away, but the witch was strong, so she grabbed the hair close to Rapunzel's head and began to cut. The shears were sharp, and the hair cut easily, and Rapunzel felt the weight lift as 20 feet of golden hair fell to the floor in massive coils, while the witch kept cutting until Rapunzel's hair was barely shoulder length. "There," the witch said, stepping back. "Now you are no one special, just an ordinary girl. Let us see if your prince still wants you." But this was more than the witch's personal revenge, because in medieval Europe, women caught in adultery or sexual transgression had their hair shorn publicly as a mark of shame, a brand burned into their identity without fire. So Rapunzel was not just punished, but marked as a woman who claimed her own body, and that mark would follow her forever. The witch gathered the cut hair and wrapped it around her arm. "And now for you. You wanted freedom. You will have it." She spoke a word and the window expanded, growing large enough for a person to fit through. "Go. Climb out. Make your way through the wilderness. See how long you survive with no skills, no knowledge, no one to help you." "You cannot." "Out now, or I will throw you out myself." Rapunzel looked at the drop, 40 feet to the ground below. "I will die." "Then die," the witch said coldly. But even in her rage, the witch could not quite kill the girl directly, so she spoke another word, and thick vines erupted from the tower wall below the window, forming a crude ladder that reached down to the ground. "Climb, and never come back." Rapunzel climbed out the window crying and terrified, making her way down the vines that were rough and scratchy and tearing at her hands, but she made it to the ground and collapsed at the base of the tower. The wilderness was no fairy tale punishment, but a historical sentence, because for centuries across Europe, girls who became pregnant outside marriage were cast into exile, and many never returned, leaving the forests full of their bones. She looked up to see the witch staring down at her. "One more thing," the witch called down. "Your prince is coming tomorrow. I will be waiting for him, and we will see how much he loves you when he learns what you really are. A thief's daughter, payment for a debt, nothing but property that changed hands." Then the window shrank back and the witch disappeared. The prince arrived the next morning as usual with his saddlebags loaded with supplies for their escape, excited and nervous and hopeful because today was the day. He called up, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The hair came cascading down, golden in the morning sun, so the prince grabbed it and began to climb, and it felt the same as always as he scaled the tower quickly and pulled himself through the window. And he found himself face to face with the witch. She was sitting in Rapunzel's chair with the severed hair wrapped around her hands, having used it to let him climb up, having used it to lure him into her trap. "Hello, Prince," she said, "looking for someone." "Who are you? Where is Rapunzel?" "Gone, cast out, banished. I'm done with her. She is ruined, thanks to you." "What did you do to her, if you hurt her?" "Hurt her. I raised her, fed her, protected her, and she repaid me by spreading her legs for the first man who climbed her tower. So yes, I hurt her. I cut her hair, threw her out. She is in the wilderness somewhere, probably dead by now." "You monster! She was your daughter." "She was never my daughter," the witch interrupted. "She was property, payment for a debt, and you stole her. You came here with your pretty words and you ruined everything." "I love her. I came to take her away, to marry her." "Love? You do not love her. You know nothing about who she is or where she came from. She is the daughter of a thief. Her father stole from my garden, and when I caught him, he traded her, his own infant daughter, to save his wife. That is who Rapunzel is. Not a princess in a tower, but just payment, the price of a handful of weeds. I do not care where she came from. I love who she is, and I'm going to find her." "Are you? Well then, off you go." She yanked the hair hard, pulling it back through the window, and the prince, standing near the opening, lost his balance and fell. Death would have been a mercy. He hit the ground hard and rolled toward the base of the tower where the witch had planted something the night before. A massive thicket of thorn bushes, thick as a man's arm and sharp as knives. The prince rolled directly into them. Thorns pierced his clothes and dug into his skin and scraped across his face, and then came the worst pain of his life as thorns punctured both his eyes. 2 thorns positioned perfectly went deep through the soft tissue of his eyeballs and into the sockets behind. The prince screamed with pure animal agony and thrashed, trying to escape, only driving them deeper into his flesh. He managed to pull himself free and collapsed on the ground as blood poured from his ruined eyes, and he could not see. There was only pain and darkness. He brought his hands to his face and felt the warm blood, felt the damage, and realized his eyes were gone. He was blind. From the tower window above, the witch watched with satisfaction. "That is the price," she called down. "That is what happens when you take what is not yours. You wanted to see her. Well, now you will never see anything again." The prince lay at the base of the tower for hours, unable to move, until eventually, driven by survival instinct, he crawled away from the tower, through the grass, into the trees, where he found a stream by sound and washed the blood from his face, then carefully touched his eyes to discover that the left one was completely gone and the right one punctured, deflated, useless. He was blind, completely and permanently blind. He thought about Rapunzel and wondered if she was alive, how he would ever find her now, but he realized he could not. He was useless. He should go home and get help, but he could not face his father's disappointment, could not face the pity. So he did not go home but stood up, picked a direction, and walked, deciding he would die in the wilderness because that was what he deserved for failing her. But death did not come as days passed, then weeks, then months, then years, and the prince wandered blind and alone, surviving on berries and roots, living like an animal through 7 years of blindness, 7 years of wishing he was dead but being too stubborn to actually die. Part 4. The Wilderness. Rapunzel walked for 3 days before she collapsed with no food, no water, no survival skills, until a traveler found her, an old woman who nursed her back to health, taught her basics, then told her to leave. Rapunzel found work at a village inn washing dishes for pennies, and she learned something terrifying. She was pregnant, because it had been a month since the tower, and she had been too traumatized to notice the signs at first, but they were unmistakable now as she was carrying Friedrich's child, or rather 2 children, as the midwife confirmed it, twins. She worked as long as she could and saved every penny until she grew too pregnant to work, then used her savings to rent a tiny room where, alone with no midwife, she gave birth to twins through pain beyond anything she had imagined. The first baby came, a girl, and she had no knife to cut the cord, so she used her teeth. And 20 minutes later, the second baby came, another girl. She named them Ilda and Helena, and raising twins alone in poverty was brutal, as she worked multiple jobs washing and cleaning and mending, anything that would pay. While years passed and her beauty faded under exhaustion, her hands became rough, and she was 24 years old but looked 40. While Rapunzel struggled, Friedrich wandered through 7 years of blindness, living like an animal and surviving on berries and roots, learning to navigate by sound but falling constantly, his body covered in scars, growing thin with matted hair until he looked like a madman, singing sometimes the folk songs Rapunzel taught him because it kept him from drowning himself. 7 years after leaving the tower, Friedrich wandered into a village, weak and starving, and sat in an alley singing for coins. Rapunzel was there that day, walking to the well with her daughters who were 7 years old now. And she heard singing, a man's voice rough and off-key but singing a song she knew. She turned to see in a filthy alley a blind beggar who was emaciated with matted hair and ruined eyes, but something about him was familiar. "Friedrich," she whispered. He stopped singing and asked, "Who is there?" "It is Rapunzel." He went still and said, "That is not possible. Rapunzel is dead." "I'm here. What happened to your eyes?" "The witch threw me from the tower. I landed in thorns. My eyes are gone. I've been wandering ever since, years now." "Why did you not go home?" He laughed bitterly and said, "And be what? A blind prince? A burden? I just walked, tried to die, failed." Rapunzel was crying now and said, "I looked for you. I thought you would find me." "I tried. I could not see. I just wandered, hoping I would hear your voice, and now I have, but it is too late." "It is not too late. I am here. We are both alive." And then she cried as all the pain of 7 years poured out. Her tears fell on his face, on his ruined eyes, and something strange happened. The old stories call it a miracle, or maybe the witch's magic could be undone by genuine connection. Friedrich felt warmth, then light, then shapes, then colors, then details. He looked up and saw Rapunzel's face, older and careworn but beautiful. "I can see," he whispered. "I can see you." They held each other and cried while the twins watched. Friedrich looked at the girls and asked, "Who are these children?" "Your daughters, Ilda and Helena. They are 7 years old. I was pregnant when the witch cast me out." "I am your father," he told them. "Our papa?" one asked. "Yes," Rapunzel said. "Your papa." Part 5. The Aftermath. They went back to Friedrich's kingdom together, a journey that took 2 weeks on foot, and the palace guards did not recognize him at first, but eventually someone saw the truth. The king was horrified by what his son had brought back. A common woman and 2 illegitimate daughters, and he wanted to send Rapunzel away, but Friedrich, who had once been compliant, had changed. "I will marry Rapunzel," he told his father, "if you cannot accept that I will abdicate." The king agreed grudgingly. The wedding was small as they married in the palace chapel with the twins as flower girls, and it should have been a happy ending, but happy endings are myths. Rapunzel became a princess with servants and wealth, but she did not know how to be royalty, as court ladies whispered behind her back, and the tower had left its mark because she could not sleep in rooms without windows, could not bear enclosed spaces, would wake up screaming from nightmares of being locked away again. The servants found her one night trying to claw through a locked door, sobbing and begging to be let out even though the door was not locked, even though she was free to leave any time she wanted. The tower was still there in her mind, and she had never really left it. Friedrich had his own demons because the years of blindness had confused his brain, making him stumble and reach for things that were not there. And some days he would lock himself in his chambers, wishing he was still blind so he would not have to see Rapunzel's haunted eyes. The witch was never found because the tower had vanished completely, leaving no resolution, no justice, just absence. And Rapunzel wanted closure, but the witch was gone. Years passed as Friedrich became king and Rapunzel became queen. They had more children, and life continued. So from the outside it looked like success. But privately Rapunzel still woke screaming. Friedrich still had phantom blindness, and they still fought about traumas they could not articulate. They loved each other, but love does not erase the past. It does not heal all wounds. It just gives you a reason to keep trying. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Friedrich asked if she was happy. She thought about it for a long time before answering. "I do not know if happy is the right word. I am alive. I have you. I have our children. I have freedom. That is more than I ever thought I would have. Is that happiness?" "I do not know either. I thought getting you back would fix everything, but we are both still broken." "Broken but functioning," Rapunzel said. "Maybe that is the best we can hope for." It was not a fairy tale ending, but it was real. Final part. The breaking seals. This story is not about love conquering all, but about the price we pay for other people's desires. Rapunzel paid for her father's theft. The prince paid for his desire. The witch paid for her need to possess. And everyone wanted something. Everyone took it. And everyone suffered. No one in this story is purely evil. Not even the witch, because she is controlling and possessive and cruel. Yes, but she is also desperately lonely, and her love was twisted and toxic, but it was a kind of love, and no one is purely good either, because the father was weak, the prince was selfish, Rapunzel made mistakes, and they are all just people making the best decisions they can with limited information and unlimited needs. But here is what Disney will never tell you. This story comes from real suffering. In 1697, a French noblewoman named Charlotte Rose de la Force was forcibly confined to a convent, where her crime was writing, thinking, refusing to marry who she was told, and while imprisoned, she wrote the original version of this tale, calling it Personnette, and she wrote it using urine as ink because she was denied paper and pen. So her body became her resistance, and her story was a confession written in the fluids of her own captivity. And she was not alone, because between the 13th and 18th centuries, Europe built over 200 towers specifically designed to imprison daughters, not criminals, not enemies, but daughters. And these towers had names like Torre della Femme in Italy, Maiden Tower in Azerbaijan, Rapunzel Tower in Germany. And the blueprints survived. The instruments of torture survived. The records of which women were sealed inside survived. These were not fairy tales, but cells, and the women inside them were buried alive for the crime of being female. The story has been told and retold across centuries, with each version stripping away darkness, as the Brothers Grimm kept the pregnancy, the blindness, the suffering, while Victorian editions removed pregnancy implications because they could not say swelling belly, so they changed it to dress growing tight, and Disney in 2010 made the tower an adventure with trauma erased and the witch becoming a simple villain. Each layer of sanitization removed what the story was trying to say. The towers are real, that people will lock you away for your own good, that desire has consequences, that trauma does not disappear when you escape your prison. The pattern repeats across cultures and religions, with Saint Barbara locked in a tower by her father for refusing marriage, the Norse goddess Sif imprisoned for her golden hair, the Greek princess Danae sealed in bronze because of a prophecy about her son, because tower imprisonment of women is not a European invention, but a global solution to the same problem. What do you do with a woman who will not obey? You lock her away, you cut her hair, you take her voice, you erase her. Rapunzel was currency, payment for a handful of weeds, as her father valued vegetables more than her freedom. The witch valued possession more than her happiness. The prince valued his desire more than her safety. and medieval Europe imprisoned daughters in towers regularly, calling it protection, making the tower in this story every father's locked room, every convent cell, every marriage cage. Hair as both rope and chain. The story does not promise that love conquers all. It does not promise healing or justice or closure, but what it promises is survival. That is all. Survival and the possibility that surviving might be enough. You can escape your tower, but the tower does not escape you. You can be free, but freedom does not erase what imprisonment did to you. And sometimes the best you can hope for is broken but functioning, traumatized but surviving, haunted but still here. The Grimm brothers ended their version with the reunion, with tears restoring sight and happily ever after, but the real story continues for decades through nightmares and phantom pains and trauma that never heals. And the real story ends with two people holding hands and watching the sunset, still not sure if what they went through was worth it, still trapped in the tower even though the tower is long gone. The tower is still out there, not just metaphorically, not just psychologically, because the tower endures in every lesson that teaches girls to be quiet, to be small, to be pure, in every rule about how they dress, how they speak, who they belong to, in purity culture that trades teenage girls like currency, in honor killings that punish female autonomy with death, in child marriage that locks girls into cages made of law and tradition. The tower is a teenage girl told her body will ruin her future. The tower is a woman who cannot leave her marriage because she has nowhere to go. The tower is every voice silenced, every autonomy punished, every woman who learned that freedom is more dangerous than captivity. There are still people locked in towers, still people controlled by others who claim it is for their protection, still voices singing from high windows that no one hears. And the story has not ended. It is still being told. For those who walk with us into fairy tale shadows, you are not alone. We break these seals together. If uncovering what the polished versions erased matters to you, subscribe so you are here when the next sealed tomb opens, because the seals are breaking, and there are so many more stories waiting to escape. See you in the next tomb.